I got out of film school and I immediately started freelancing. I went to LA, I started grinding it out on sets, PAing and then coordinating and then production managing and doing various things. Eventually I wound up in the doc world, but you can blink and spend 15 years just freelancing, jumping from set to set. And It's a way to burn out. It's a way to pay your bills, sure. But it's also, if you want to be a storyteller, a director, it's also a way to not live life, really. And the thing that I started to feel was, I don't want to be scared of the world. I want to have experiences. I'm endlessly fascinated by the geopolitics of more than just Latin America, but Latin America, Europe, these places. I want to understand war. I want to understand the extreme things that are impacting all of our lives, so that when we hear politicians talking about a migrant crisis or refugees fleeing Syria or the impact of the withdrawal from Afghanistan, when I hear these stories, I want to have an intimate understanding of them and a human one.
La promesa que yo le digo a los emigrantes es que tengan precaución, si llevan niños, cuiden lo más que lo más pueda, que cumplan sus sueños. ¿Cuál es el sueño del emigrante venezolano? Extranjeros de Ecuador, Perú, chinos, árabes, llegar a los Estados Unidos.
The New York City Mayor Eric Adams declaring a state of emergency over the ever-escalating number of asylum seekers coming to the city.
You hear hurricane warnings. I think Sandy was a great example. When it hit, it got out of hand and we lost so many lives.
Si alguien me dijera, cruzo la selva de irme para los Estados Unidos, yo le diría que no lo haga. No sabes si vas a salir vivo o muerto de ahí.
The U.S. is facing a humanitarian crisis over where to place migrants who are seeking asylum in this country.
Human beings should not be treated as pawns in a political game.
Once again, attention is at our southern border. A new era of immigration policy here in the U.S.
Good day, filmmaker Nathaniel Lezra of Roads of Fire. Nat, how are you today?
I'm great, man. How are you?
I'm fantastic. This is going to be released on the second anniversary of the pod, started July 4th, 2023. And I can't think of a better film and filmmaker to have on than you. Roads of Fire is vital filmmaking. I feel like it's of the moment and will help people understand what's going on in the migrant crisis. So you hear a lot of things on the news. And I think for a lot of people, they might tune out because they don't necessarily understand all the moving parts. And I feel because your film is so ambitious, it helps explain what's going on. And you have a theatrical release planned in September. Do you see it as a way of an explainer for people to be able to understand what's going on when they step in the theater?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're hoping to do. It's important to remember with this film that it traces very much my own exposure and journey becoming more aware of the migrant crisis. So it starts from a position where I understood that the New York City government, the local administration, the mayor's Adams administration, I could see very visibly the areas in which they were lacking and where they were failing to meet the need of the moment. And so I saw that was my initial vantage point. And I saw how the NGOs and the local mutual aid groups were stepping up to fill that void. But that was really all of my knowledge. I understood that there were people on the streets. I understood broadly that they were coming from really all over the globe, but I didn't know a lot of the minutia. And so as you watch the film, you're really watching my own trajectory with growing more aware of the situation. And as the film developed, it became clear to me that the geopolitics of Latin America were really crucial to understand. So that's why we went down there. And as you watch the film, and what I hope to achieve in September is for people to walk into a theater and walk out with a much more intimate understanding of what is happening in their world.
The other, really, there's so many great parts about it, but one of the parts that stood out to me is that it's a straight shooter of a film. I think maybe Hollywood has this idea that you're going to get some sort of leftist view of it, and certainly that's fine. There are films that do that. And not to say that it's also some sort of magnified view of the crisis either. It's not that. But I feel, and I'm interested in getting your thoughts on this, it's such a hard topic to venture into, right? Is that some people might see it one way, other people might see it the other way. But I feel you could get in a theater, and no matter what your political beliefs are on this, you could learn something from this film, and it comes across as even-handed. Was that part of your intention as well?
Absolutely. That makes me really happy that you're saying that, because that was always a really explicit intention of ours. We wanted people to, first and foremost, it does perform an educational function, like we talked about. It's to show you the ins and outs of this crisis. But more than anything, I wanted people of any political background to be able to relate to the humanity of the people on screen. There isn't a primary antagonist. All that we're presenting you with are the human stories of the various different people at play. And broadly, the film will have succeeded if, regardless of your political affiliation, you'll walk outside your door and you see a migrant, or you see a refugee, or somebody in line at a soup kitchen. You'll now understand maybe what they're fleeing and why they're there, and that they're people who have certain rights based on the city that they're in.
And so it has a theatrical run planned for September, which I think is fairly rare for documentary to have that kind of run. Was that sort of, when you went to find distribution for it, was that sort of a requirement that you had and something you wanted to have as part of this film?
Requirement, no. As many as I'm sure you are as well, too. I'm very aware of the challenges facing the industry right now, especially for documentaries. I sat on a panel at Santa Barbara, largely talking about this. Demanding, requiring, these are words that you have to expel from your vocabulary in the documentary world. We take what we can get. But I will say that it was always really important to me to have some element of an impact campaign. So even if what we got was a VOD or a streaming deal, we were always going to do a college tour. We were always going to approach NGOs in each of these target cities. So there's always going to be some live event element to it. We've already obviously played festivals, but as things became more and more clear that there was a real need for people to see this film, with what we've seen in LA happening with ICE, with different zones in the country being impacted by this issue increasingly, and how it's just not going away. It's a part of our life now. It became really clear to us, and the distributor, I should say, they're fabulous people, and they're doing a really good job already. It became clear to all of us that this needed to be accessible on a much bigger level in person, because it's such a conversation starter. It's such a, like I said, a blueprint for a new understanding of this. As we have situations where ICE are beating down people's doors, are in plain clothes, concealing themselves at DMVs or at supermarkets or at Home Depots, having a film that can at least communicate to people the humanity of the people being abducted from the streets, I think is crucial. And again, it's a conversation starter for people on both sides of the aisle. It's very important to me that it's a bipartisan film. So it's people of all shapes, sizes, stripes, and parties can come see this movie and walk away with at least a deeper understanding, which I think the current climate needs.
I couldn't agree more. So another part of this is just the ambition of it. So you're watching three threads, right? You're watching one of the humanitarian organizations, one of the asylum seekers in New York City, and then three in Colombia, what it is like for a migrant. How, technically, were you able to handle all this? Did you have a large crew that was filming in these areas in different places? Was it just on flights back and forth? Technically, how did this happen?
It's a good question. It's the vast majority, I should say, was very much just me.
Yeah.
Basically, the way that I structured it was when we needed interviews and we needed and I could pinpoint days in which we would need a more traditionally structured crew. I had enough of a sense of the environment or what the day was going to look like that I could put that together. So if it was an interview context, we'd have a crew. If it was a really complicated day, like the day where we had at the NGO in New York, Evie Loves NYC, we had about 1,000 people coming in who are asylum seekers. So I had a crew of about 5 people that day. And then in Colombia, we really needed a crew. And when I say a crew, I'm talking 5 people, 6 people.
Right. Yeah, no, you're not talking 50 people going on.
This is not the Avengers. No, but in Colombia, we had a fixer, 2 security guys, a B-cam operator, and a producer. This film was really, it lives and breathes and dies on the back of the intimacy and the trust with the participants. Yep. So I'm actually really thankful for some of the financial limitations that we did have, because when it's just you, the camera on your shoulder, sitting opposite an asylum seeker who's bearing her soul, you develop such a trust language that she ultimately, we spent 2.5 years together, me and Maria, and she, by the end, was a very legitimate friend as much as she was a collaborator in the film. And she was telling me incredibly painful, harrowing, and great truths about her life. And I don't think that would have happened had every time I shot, I had a 10-person crew. And I've done those films and those documentaries. Right. But that's not to say that there isn't a way to do that. Our film that we shot in Poland on the border with Ukraine, there was a lot of incredibly powerful, intimate moments. And we had a 15-person crew on that one. But with this, it needed to be lean. It needed to be mean. I needed to shoot in a tiny, cramped asylum seeker support kitchen. So it's the language, the visual language of the film, I think, ultimately actually favored just a one-man band, 2, 3, 4-person team max.
And so you probably, maybe there is a guy coming out of film school at NYU or USC who has been in class all their whole life, whatever, they could do this. But I would imagine that a lot of this came from your experience. So I want to read exactly the quote you have on your website, because I think it's very descriptive of what you do. Creative focus on telling humanist stories that illuminate extreme experiences outside the conventions of contemporary culture. So you, like you mentioned, you went to Poland and the border of Ukraine. In another film that you have, Don't Leave Me Behind, stories of Ukraine, young Ukrainian survival. Where did this come from? That this idea of I'm going to go out to extremists, because I don't want to have somebody thinking, they're listening to this and thinking, oh yeah, I just graduated film school. Now I'm going to go to Colombia or Ukraine and follow this guy, his path. It's a great way to get killed. So how did you come up with this experience?
I think first off, I would say that I've never put myself in a position other than once or twice in Colombia where I felt like I was letting go of control and truly just riding what was given to me in terms of safety. I think so. When I talk to people about this stuff, I often say you'd be surprised what your own nuts and bolts production literacy will get you. So we live in a world that's extremely connected and where most countries have a at least relatively robust film industry or at least some infrastructure. So rather than treating something like the Ukraine film or Colombia, I'm going to go throw myself out into the wild blue yonder and I'm going to confront some danger and have this sort of adventure, sexy element to it. I thought about it from a nuts and bolts production perspective. All right, so we're going to go shoot in a location. I need production infrastructure. I need a producer who knows the area. I need a sound recordist. I need people who are going to provide or perform the functions of film production. And when you start to look at it from that perspective, it becomes a much more tangible process. What are the variables that are at play? All right, flying, there are visa elements, there are lodging consideration, things like that. So that's all actually really important to talk about, because the world should be less intimidating to people, and these stories are out there. And this goes into the second thing I talk about. I got out of film school and I immediately started freelancing. I went to LA, I started grinding it out on sets, PAing and then coordinating, and then production managing and doing various things. Eventually I wound up in the doc world. But you can blink and spend 15 years just freelancing, jumping from set to set. And it's a way to burn out. It's a way to pay your bills, sure. But it's also, if you want to be a storyteller, a director, it's also a way to not live life, really. And the thing that I started to feel was, I don't want to be scared of the world. I want to have experiences. I'm endlessly fascinated by the geopolitics of more than just Latin America, but Latin America, Europe, these places. I want to understand war. I want to understand the extreme things that are impacting all of our lives, so that when we hear politicians talking about a migrant crisis or refugees fleeing Syria or the impact of the withdrawal from Afghanistan, when I hear these stories, I want to have an intimate understanding of them, and a human one. I want to understand what the actual impact of these events are on the people at play. And for me, the only way to do that is to find those stories and just accept my vulnerability and accept my ignorance to some degree, and walk out into the world and see what the world has to offer. And I think as soon as I started doing that, it was completely transformative. Colombia, Ukraine, these places, because it taught me fundamentally, if you go out into the world and in good faith, you sit with somebody who has lived a radically different life than you, who has completely different experiences than you have, whose life you know nothing about. And if you in good faith will sit with them, they will talk to you, and they will understand that a human being is in front of them who's offering them a microphone to speak to their life. And that is an opportunity that they'll take, and they'll bring you along with them. And especially in Colombia, that completely changed my life. Sitting on the beach in the migrant camp with these people who were 3 months ago engineers or doctors or nurse practitioners or grad students or upholsterers, and are now making 10 cents a week living off of whatever they can find on the beaches, living in a tent. Sitting with them and being invited into their camp was one of the most transformative experiences of my professional life. And yeah, I think, just to summarize this rant that I just did.
No, I love that answer so much.
Yeah, getting into the world, not being scared of the world, understanding that people are there and they will talk to you, and then also trusting your production language, knowing that you can do it.
Wow. That's so inspirational. I hope somebody hears that and wants to go out, because that really is the most exciting part about the world, right? Is it's finding the extreme type of things, the people that are the world's best or the world's most unique at whatever it is. It can be almost an unlimited amount of topics. When you talk about things about where people are at the top of their craft, are doing something so unique that like the war in Ukraine or the migrant, something so unique that the story needs to be told. It's like you said, it's life-changing, and you really see the best and worst of humanity, but it helps you understand humanity with that focus. And it's wonderful to see that's what you are spending your career on. So you do brand work as well. Is that you found a niche for yourself, given how hard documentary is, where people say, okay, this is what this guy brings to the table, this is his focus. And so when you're talking to brands, you're talking about future documentaries, narrative, they know what they're going to get from you. Is that sort of how you're approaching things?
Yeah, I think so. You pitch yourself with what you kill at or what you can bring to the table. I've also freelanced just a huge amount across the board. When I'm talking to brands, what I bring is just a comprehensive capacity to execute. So if they need something done, it's all right, I'll perform a creative function, but I'll also produce this thing and we'll just get it done. I do that less and less these days. I'm very much committed right now to full-time documentary work. I'm on a new film right now. I'm flying out tomorrow to shoot. But yeah, I think that you present yourself with what you have to offer. What I have to offer, I think, is I seem to have found myself in a place where I'll, for better or worse, for my mental and physical health, I'll basically throw myself all the way in. So if people need me to go to a rough and tumble part of the world to go capture something, I can go do it. I also, at this point, can offer a fairly global network. So if you need something in Sydney, South Africa, anywhere in Europe, and in a lot of Latin America, I have now relationships that can execute for you.
That's incredible. That's such an incredible story. And I think it is a path forward, right? Making your career as a documentary filmmaker. So hopefully when somebody hears this, they think whatever their niche could be, it may not be going to Ukraine, but they can still find a niche of telling interesting stories. And it sounds like you found a way to be able to do that. What has led to you moving to documentary? So you did narrative work on your Vimeo. You have some great shorts. I went back and watched Echo Park, which came out a few years ago, which is a narrative feature, which I enjoyed. It's an early, you can see where your mind is at on some about Roads to Fire on this, of the kind of questions you are thinking about. What has led you to documentary? I assume you're not shutting the door completely on narrative, but what has led you specifically to concentrating more on documentary?
The door is definitely not shut on narrative. I'm in a very slow burn narrative project right now. We're in a research stage. I think I'm very flattered that you watched an Echo Park. It makes me very happy. It's when I think about that film, my mind actually goes to documentary. I think about the way that I approached writing that was very much looking at my surroundings and frankly having an itch that I would learn in the future is a documentary itch. I was right in that pocket of time when that neighborhood was gentrifying, and it was a gang neighborhood, mostly Salvadoran. And then you had all these gentrifying kids coming out of film school and moving there like I was. And so I was really interested in the tension created by that. And yeah, I think that basically what I found was I graduated from film school and I lived on set or with people who went to film school. And that was my world. And suddenly I was really intrigued by all of these. And I had been in the past. I was really intrigued by all of these variables and these different elements culturally and politically around me that I just hadn't experienced yet. And so making narrative is great. I think that you need to live life in a serious way before you take a bite out of a narrative project. I think that my feeling was, we did a few shorts, we did that film, we tapped here and there throughout an Echo Park. I think it taps into something very real feeling. And I was excited by that. But when I watched it back, I always felt like the things that felt real and honest in that film were the things that were not planned and were tiny and intimate. 3 crew members and an actor just discovering something. Like, there are these tiny little things. And I started to realize, this is around 2016. So we shot that film before the election and then subsequent inauguration of Donald Trump. But around 2016, I flew to DC and I covered the street protests surrounding the inauguration that year. And that was my first real doc. It was a verite doc. It was just short, very rough and tumble street doc. But I found a lot of the things that intrigued me about the narratives that I'd done, some of those nuggets, I felt the entirety of in that doc piece about the street protests, people being honest, that sort of aliveness where there's an unpredictability to what people are going to say and how that's going to impact the project. And just in doing that, I fell in love with documentary. I think that I've always been intrigued by elements of realism and what that actually means, naturalism, realism. And initially it was a challenge to get myself out of my comfort zone, out of my world, and to figure out, what do I actually want out of my life? What do I want to say with these things? If all of my narratives are about the world, then I need to go be in it and I need to go experience it and I need to have my ass kicked by it. And so that's what I started to want to do. And that's what I did.
Holy shit. That's such an incredible answer. Wow. Wow. That's amazing. And so you're saying that it's hard to go straight into narrative without having that life experience of trying to get at those little moments that tell a bigger story. To try to take your film from good to exceptional really requires those little moments that you saw in Echo Park after watching it again.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's something I think a lot of directors later on that I look up to talk about, how the distinction between their first films and their later things is understanding, first off, what their role in the world is and what their voice can do in terms of finding honesty. And yeah, I think for me, it's understanding that the themes that I'm interested in, I need to experience firsthand, and I need to have a much more intimate interpersonal relationship with them before I want to start talking about them in a narrative context. Yeah, I think that's where my head's at.
Wow. So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask a globe-trotting filmmaker about gear, as there's a whole YouTube cottage industry of documentary filmmakers and other filmmakers. That's like, here's the latest gear reviews.
Sure.
It pays the bills. Good for them. But how much do you take in that stuff? How much do you think gear matters on the experience? How much are you involved in all of that?
I'm involved in it insofar as, well, I've got my camera right here that I shoot a lot on. This is my FX6. I'm a big believer in finding a sensor that's going to work for you, that's going to deliver you a cinema product, but also one that's a camera build that is user-friendly. I'm not a trained cinematographer. I went to school for directing, so I, out of just utility in the moment, trained myself on the FX6. There's not a lot of radical difference between the Sony series products. So the FX3 is obviously sort of the baby version of the 6, and then the 9 and the Burano. This new film I'm doing is very much, I'm shooting the FX6, my DP is shooting the Burano and the FX9. I think having something compact that will yield a high value product is critical. I think having something you don't have to think too much about, at least for me. I'm not very techie. I need something that I can just navigate easily, not think too much about. And if it gets destroyed in the field,
that works.
That works. Yeah, exactly. And if it gets destroyed in the field, I'm not going to have mortgaged a house and sold a kidney to afford. An FX6 is not too expensive off the shelf, and it's a great camera. Right. I'm really excited about the new G Master lens that Sony put out, the 28-70. They, tend to really rock with the Sonys right now.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I think there's probably a lot of, I don't know if a lot, but some documentary filmmakers who are caught up on, I need to have a red camera or whatever it is to be able to film my documentary. And I don't think that's the case at all.
No. This is actually a really interesting sort of sub-conversation. I spoke to some high schoolers not too long ago, and a lot of people are really astounded to learn just the value of your iPhone. Tech, when you're in a position where you can get a cinema camera and you can get a small crew together, that's great. But a compelling real world story can be captured absolutely on a cell phone. absolutely on whatever is at your fingertips. Again, the beauty of documentary as a form is that it's alive and it hinges on the intimacy that you have with your participants. If you're in a unique environment and you're seeing things that the world needs to see and that you're personally compelled by, and all you have is an iPhone, then that's a great camera for it. I really try to communicate. Don't let the limitations of what you have in terms from a monetary perspective, from a gear perspective, don't let that hinder necessarily what you're trying to do. If you're in a unique environment and a story's in front of you, you're great. Go do.
That's awesome. So the film comes out, Roads of Fire, in September, theatrical release. You're going to be hitting major cities. I assume it's related to where you guys can find the most interesting discussions on the migrant crisis, New York, Los Angeles, I think some sites in Texas. Can you talk about anything else next that you have going on? Indie filmmakers have to have 5 or 10 different projects. I know you might have some other brand work or other projects you can't talk about, but is there anything that you'd want to share that you can?
Yeah, I'm right now. I've got this film that I'm doing that I can't say too much about, but it's a feature doc. It's
Nice.
It's stepping into the world of environmentalism, which I'm really excited about. That's something that I've always wanted to find a way into because it's something I care about, but I don't know how. I've never really just thrown myself in, as I've learned that I need to do to really discover a subject. But I'm spending a lot of time with people in the environmental world, which is exciting. And yeah, I've got a scripted project that's got, broadly speaking, also about refugee experiences. So I'm keeping close to that theme.
That's awesome.
And I've got a couple other things cooking. Yeah.
That's fantastic. And I think once Roads of Fire comes out, I'm sure that you're just going to get more opportunities for your filmmaking to be seen. And it's going to be a great experience for you.
I appreciate you saying that, man. My goal, as ever, is just to get the film out and to have these conversations. So I appreciate you, man. I was so happy that you reached out. It's a great conversation. And I think that if the film can do anything, it's ignite cross-aisle conversation about how we can better treat people in this country.
Yeah.
There's no deeper political message that I can think of other than how can we improve the material conditions of people's lives who are coming to this country from fleeing war and economic collapse. This country made a promise to the world, and this is at the beating heart of the film, is this idea that the United States made a promise to the world in this, since its founding, but really explicitly in the 70s and 80s, that the value of our country and the strength of our country hinges on its immigrant population. And if we close the door on that population, then our strength in the world gets lost. That is an incredibly powerful narrative around the world. Even if we take that for granted or we think that's a cliche, around the world it's not. And people come to this country seeing opportunity, seeing a place that will give them a second chance to rebuild their lives in the wake of genocide, war, economic collapse, personal crises of all kinds. So what can we do, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, lefty, righty, whatever, what can we do to make everybody's life better and safer? And that's the central question.
Yeah, I knew those shots of the Statue of Liberty must have meant something to you in the film.
Also, you can just get those shots for free at the Brooklyn Promenade. So it ain't too hard to get that. Thanks.
Nathaniel, Indie Film Podcast, love hyping other people's projects as it's hard out there. And so to have a film like this, it came from a team, right? You weren't just doing it by yourself. It was other filmmakers who helped teach you to have the different experiences that you were able to bring on Roads of Fire. So is there a film or filmmaker that you wish more people knew about?
Oh, man, it's such a good question. It's an overwhelming question because obviously, yes,
it is.
I can speak to basically, I'll say the ones that I think in the documentary space that really helped me find my voice. So Joshua Oppenheimer, he did The Act of Killing. This is a great film, unbelievable film. It's a masterpiece. I was shaken to my core by its follow-up called The Look of Silence. The Look of Silence is an unbelievable film. I really recommend that. Oppenheimer, he's a big name in the doc world, but a lot of people haven't seen The Look of Silence. So I recommend that. Then I started doing doc right when Matt Heineman's work was starting to pop. So he did Cartel Land, and he did The First Wave. He did Retrograde recently. his work was very influential to me. And then recently, man, I saw The Territory by Alex Pritz was fabulous. He's a New York guy. I know some folks who've shot with him. And I just recently saw 20 Days in Mariupol, which was a frontline piece, but it was shattering and incredible. That's my widely cast net of people who I recommend and films that I recommend.
That's a fantastic answer. Nathaniel Lezra, the film is Roads of Fire. I would say check the film's website and Instagram to find out screening dates.
Yep. The Instagram is getting built up right now by the distributor,
Okay.
New Mountain Films. You can check out the website, roadsoffiredoc.com, and you can check me out on Instagram, Nat Lezra Film, and everything will be everywhere soon.
Awesome. I'm cheering for your continued success. The film is incredible. I hope it does give people the ability to talk about this issue, because I think it's so sorely needed. We're almost two sides talking past each other. And I feel this film is a way for people to connect on the issue, which is something our country desperately needs. And so I'm excited to see what comes next. And thanks for honoring me to be the second anniversary episode for the pod. I couldn't think of someone better to talk with.
I'm so honored and humbled to be here with you, man. Thank you. And I've listened through of the podcast, and it's great work that you do. So thank you. And I'm honored to be here.